Hi class. As you know, we've been learning about Jimi Hendrix, the famous guitarist, and I wanted to read you this really sweet story about Jimi Hendrix's childhood. This is Jimi Sounds Like a Rainbow, a story of the young Jimi Hendrix by Golio, illustrated by Javica Steptoe. Illustrated means that the artwork was by this person, Javica Steptoe. Jimi sounds like a rainbow. You see the record here. Records are what people used to play music during the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And on this page, there's a beautiful illustration of an electric guitar. We can tell it's electric because it has these buttons here. And also, the box is not hollow. Seattle, Washington, 1956. Electricity ripped through the air. A lightning flash lit up the room. Thunder rocked the house. Jimi's hand jumped, and a rainbow of colored pencils went tumbling to the floor. Outside, rain began trickling off the roof and plinking into the metal gutter. Drops bounced onto the windowsill. A breeze rippled the glass chimes on the porch. For a moment, Jimi thought he heard a woman's name being blown in the wind. Jimi grabbed his one-string ukulele, which is another string instrument. He could play only simple tunes, but now he had a new idea. He pulled the string and let it snap back, tapping gently with his finger up and down the neck to get just the right notes, over and over, until he could play the sound of the raindrops singing as they fell. Look at those beautiful illustrations. After the storm, Jimi stepped out onto the porch of the boarding house where he and his father lived. Down the street, a child was laughing, squealing like a clarinet on one of Daddy's big band records. A truck engine backfired, pounding like a bass drum, as a neighbor's rake played snare against the sidewalk. A dog yowled, a siren wailed in the distance, and a bird rattled off a string of high, wild notes. The sounds of life were calling out, and Jimi Hendrix wanted to answer them. Terry and Potato Chip waved from across the street. They loved Jimi's drawings and funny stories he told, and the way he could imitate guitars and trumpets with his mouth and hands. And they never teased him about his worn-out clothes or wild hair, the way some kids did, or because he was always moving from one part of town to another when Dad was out of work. They were the Three Musketeers, best friends for life. Down at the record store, the boys checked out the top 10 hits each week. Crazy about music, they would chatter for hours about the latest rock and roll songs. Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and B.B. King. The airwaves were sizzling with exciting new sounds and rhythms. See him mouthing as if he's playing a trumpet. Amazing. I remember that he couldn't read or write back then, so music was his outlet. Oh, cool. Look at that. I have to turn the book over. Sometimes Jimi and his friends bicycled down to the lake, a magical place of deep green leaves and dark purple shadows. They'd throw rocks in the water, listening to them plop and gurgle as they sank. All around, there were birds singing and bees buzzing and breezes whistling through the trees. Above the clouds, airplane engines droned and whirred. With every sound, a color glowed in Jimi's mind. Blue was the whoosh of the cool water splashing over the rocks. Orange and red, the crackling of a campfire. Green, the rustle of 1,000 leaves. How amazing. He's seeing color in everything. At home, Jimi drew and painted for hours. He filled pages with sleek-finned spaceships, knights on horseback, fierce Indian chiefs, and castles in the sky. A teacher even let him cover the blackboard once in chalk drawings of Mexico, in bold, blazing yellows, purples, and reds. Jimi's imagination was on fire, and a tune was always playing in his head. At night, he'd listen to Dad croon along with gospel, jazz, or blues records on the old phonograph. A song by Muddy Waters, with its wailing guitar and harmonica, set off fireworks in his mind. He wondered, could a person use music like chalks and colored pencils? Could someone paint pictures with sound? Sweeping up his room one day, Jimi stopped and held the broom in his arms. He strummed on the bristles, sliding his fingers back and forth along the wooden handle. Was that what it was like to hold a real guitar? To swing it up and down, to make music while you sang? On the radio, Elvis Presley's Hound Dog shook the speaker. Elvis was the king, twisting and shouting to the beat of rock and roll. Jimi strummed his broom again. Pieces of straw went flying into the air as he wiggled his hips like Elvis and sang his heart out for an imaginary audience of screaming fans. Sitting on the porch one night, Jimi watched as the landlady's son cradled a worn wooden guitar in his lap and began to sing. The man's voice was dark and smooth like velvet. The blues, they is lonely sound, like the whistle of a train, full of tender feelings and pouring down like rain. Notes spun from the strings, flickering in the air like fireflies. Jimi's eyes shone. He could feel the music tingling in his fingertips. When the landlady's son offered to sell his guitar for $5, Jimi begged his dad to buy it. Now he had an instrument of his own. Night after night he'd sit alone in his room, plunk, plunk, plunking along for hours. On a small transistor radio, Jimi tuned in his favorite songs and learned them note for note. From Dad's old blues records, he soaked up the gritty sounds of guitar masters Lightnin' Hopkins and Howlin' Wolf. He practiced and practiced, training his ears and his hands, and each day he got a little better. Before long, Jimi could play the guitar while Potato Chips sang, or jam with Terry as his fingers tickled the keys of an old piano in the basement. Every note, every chord was like a new color for Jimi. He had a rainbow of sounds at his fingertips, and he wanted to paint the world with them. Soon Jimi played well enough to join a local band. But when he first performed on stage, the screaming saxophone, pounding drum, and rocking piano drowned out his wooden guitar. He felt invisible. If he wanted to be heard, he'd need a louder guitar, an electric guitar. Money was tight, but Dad could see what music meant to his son. It may have been the cheapest model, but to Jimi, his new white Supro Ozark guitar was pure gold. With the flick of a switch, Jimi's life was electrified. Now he could plug into an amplifier, turn up the volume, and hold his own with the band. You can see how his guitar is now plugged in to that amplifier over there. That's what gives the electric guitar its loud noise. Practicing at a friend's house one day, Jimi heard the amplifier making strange, eerie sounds. Out of the speaker came buzzes and whistles, fuzzy noises and raspy humming. Strumming the guitar made the noises shift and change. By turning the knobs and stretching the guitar strings, Jimi found that he could play with the different sounds. He ran his fingers up and down the neck, tapping and scrapping and plucking and sliding and picking. Then a smile crossed his face. Suddenly, the room filled with a rocket's roar, crashing waves, the buzz of swarming bees. Jimi was finally painting with sound. Like no one before him, Jimi Hendrix taught his guitar to sing, scream, laugh, and cry. He learned to use it as an artist uses paint, creating new worlds with the colors of sound. To the heart and soul of the blues, he added the restless energy of rock and roll. His playing became bold as lightning, wild as the waves, free as the wind through the trees. Dressed in the colors of the rainbow, he played for audiences far and wide, joining fiery sounds with tender feelings and painting the world with his songs. Ooh, another one. Don't let nobody turn you off from your own thoughts and dreams, Jimi Hendrix said. This is a beautiful representation that the artist did of Jimi Hendrix. That's it. Thank you for joining me for reading Jimi Sounds Like a Rainbow. I hope you learned a lot about Jimi Hendrix and connect with him as an artist.